Welcome back to True Vine Talks with Rachel and Linda. We took a little time off because I was a little dysregulated with my emotion of fear. And that's what we're going to segue into today is talking about emotions 101.
Yeah, that's right. We're always talking about emotionally focused therapy on here, the therapy we love most. And so we're going to talk about, what even are emotions and how do you feel them? How do you experience them? So a lot of people aren't really sure.
Yes, that is so true. And I was listening to several things regarding emotion, and we used to believe that thoughts, cognitions were what motivated us to act. But later science, through attachment theory, through Dr. Sue Johnson's work, and putting electrodes on the body, they found, or on the, doing the brain scans, that we experience emotion, and that's what motivates our behavior. So,
Yeah. So let's walk through, for starters, there's actually 4 parts to every emotional experience. So the first one is the cue or the trigger. It's like, okay, what just happened around you to start this chain of events?
yeah. Watching the news 4 weeks ago triggered a anxious fear response. So that was the cue, seeing the Ukraine being invaded. My body response was a tightness in my stomach, in my body. So the felt sense, the physical sensation of the fear. And the meaning that, go ahead, Miss Rachel.
Yeah, I was just going to expand. That was a great, so the second one is that bodily response, right? Physiological, maybe your stomach churns, maybe you feel pressure in your chest, maybe you start to sweat. If it's a positive emotion, maybe you smile or maybe you laugh. We don't want to leave the good stuff out.
Happy emotions are good.
Yeah. And so then your body is experiencing this change in feeling because there is a deep meaning that's being made based on what you've just experienced, right? So you saw the news and this means, oh no, we're going to war, maybe. This is really scary. Yeah.
The cue is the negative event, and then the body makes meaning, like you said, out of that event. So that's what emotion helps us to know is this fearful? Is this a positive experience, or is this a negative experience? And then after that, we have the behavioral response. And for me, the behavioral response was to pray and to stop watching the news.
Wise. Yeah.
Can't do anything. And that makes you feel helpless. And what happens when a person feels helpless?
It's not good. We feel kind of stuck or trapped. Yeah.
When I feel helpless, it doesn't motivate you to want to do, you just want to hide.
Yeah.
And we can't hide. So.
Not forever. Yeah. What are some other behavioral responses, real quick? I think we've mentioned them before, but just to kind of remind people, this is where that comes in. This is like your fight flight in a way, like when you make that meaning, do you get angry and defensive and want to yell or fight? Do you want to hit someone? Do you want to punch the wall? Or do you want to get out of there? Do you want to run away? Or do you shut down, get real quiet, freeze up?
Good points, Rachel. It's, sometimes people want to run away, sometimes they want to stay and fight. And that's, when they feel that fear. And so that's an important behavioral response to that. And just recognizing, and this is what we teach in therapy is, it's so good, isn't it, Rachel, when people are like, oh, so now I track that. That's why I respond this way to my partner
Yes.
or
Yeah.
to a situation. They didn't realize why they were behaving in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And number 2, we talk about primary versus secondary emotions. And this was so tricky for me. I've had the hardest time grasping the difference between a primary and a secondary till you helped me make sense of it, Rachel.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I always remember like the primary emotion is my primary goal to figure out. That's what I'm aiming to try to learn when I'm working with a client is what is the primary emotion in that situation? That's the root. That's what's actually creating the meaning. That's what's actually creating this behavioral response. Is that primary, which a lot of times is like guilt, shame, embarrassment, fear, sadness, right? The secondary emotion is the emotion that we feel anytime we're experiencing a particular primary emotion that is either scary or uncomfortable. So for a lot of people, if they become angry and they were never allowed to express anger, they never saw anger like managed appropriately and shared in a healthy way, then they can become really scared and they can shut down. And so fear in that scenario would be the secondary emotion. Anger would be the primary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm processing. See,
yeah. The secondary is how you feel about your original feeling.
Oh, very well stated. How you feel about your original feeling.
Yeah, the primary emotion.
So if I feel sad, I say, and I get angry instead of sad.
Yes. Yeah. I'm mad that I feel sad because sad is weakness. I don't want to be weak. So I'm angry that I feel sad because I don't want to feel sad.
There, that helps.
Yeah.
See? Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel.
You're welcome.
All emotions are human experiences. None carry any moral goodness or wrongness. So in that, anger can evoke behavior that could be morally dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people see that growing up. They see anger expressed in very unhealthy ways. They see boundaries being crossed and they see people getting hurt. They experience getting hurt. And so they grow up and they think, I never want to hurt anyone in the way that I was hurt, in the way that I saw my family members being hurt. And so they think that the way to ensure that they don't do that, that never happens, is to just not be angry.
And what happens when we're never experience anger?
It's a problem. Yeah. You're not assertive. You tend to be taken advantage of because you're not setting like really firm boundaries. Yeah. And there are people out there that will cross your boundaries. You got to be able to say, hey, I'm upset with you right now. This is not okay.
I don't like it when you come in and just throw your stuff all over the floor, or, a lot of times people won't even assert small boundaries like that. Leaving their dishes in the sink for you to clean. They're not your dishes. That makes you feel angry, but you fear asserting that boundary because anger always led to explosion as a kid. It did for me. So I remember my dad would get mad over dumb stuff. Nobody knew. And then you just start breaking stuff and you'd be like, what? What made you mad? No one even knew. So, anger was dysregulated in my home. So therefore, anger for me is not it's an emotion that put a moral compass on, Miss Rachel.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we just talked about like primary and secondary, I think a lot of people learn that when they grew up in a house where there was a lot of unhealthy anger being expressed, that was a secondary emotion because that individual probably didn't know how to really express all the primary emotions that were coming up. Everything just came out as anger. Every single thing.
Everything.
Yeah.
But what they were really feeling, what my father was really feeling, was sad and scared. No one knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, understanding what you're feeling and expressing that in a healthy way can prevent outbursts that are uncontrollable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, Miss Rachel, we're on number 4, which we have a guest speaker on today's group.
Yay.
Group therapy.
Drum roll.
Mr. Grant, put your phone away. Yes. All right, I'm gonna let you ask Rachel because he's, I'm mom. So
Yeah, so we just kind of went through the basics of emotion, and I'm really happy to have Grant here. He's a senior in high school, he's a young adult, and so I wanted to get his perspective on what he wishes more people his age knew about emotion.
That's a good question. I think at this age, there's a lot to be said about recognizing emotions and realizing what you're feeling. That's probably one of the hardest things to do. They might know what an emotion is, but they don't know what it feels like. So recognizing like anger versus sadness is kind of hard actually when you're really down to it, because sometimes you'll feel angry or sad, but sometimes you'll feel both. Recognizing the root of the issue can be very helpful.
Yeah, that's such great advice, Grant. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there anything that you could share that has helped you personally, like distinguish? And if you're not comfortable answering that, that's totally okay.
No, I'm comfortable. I mean, it's probably just quiet time and really knowing yourself. Finding quiet time and listening to yourself talk, even out loud, kind of explains things to you. Sometimes you'll say things, what you really feel, but not even think about it. And that's like car rides on the way home. I got the music on, and I'll just be talking to myself. It's pretty embarrassing, but whatever. I talk to myself and I hear, oh gosh, camera's blurry.
There we go.
I'll be talking to myself and I'll hear myself say something. And I'll rewind, let me hear that again. And I'll be like, wow, so that's the way I'm really feeling.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that because that's what happens when someone's in therapy. You're talking this out loud, and there's something really powerful about hearing yourself say something and it clicks. You're so right.
Or sometimes when you're giving advice to other people, you realize that's the advice you may need.
Yeah. How often does that happen? You're absolutely right. And then you're like, maybe I should take that advice, right? It's a lot harder to take it than it is to give, huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Linda, do you have any questions?
coming back into it's my boy.
Oh.
And my question is, like, how has your generation made sense of the pandemic emotionally?
I would honestly, on a greater scale, I would say they haven't.
Oh, wow.
I would say, I think there's a lot to be said about how the pandemic has changed people's personalities, really. Or maybe even help them recognize things that they weren't really thinking about, or how they deal with friendships, how friendships have been desecrated or even built up by the being at home.
Wow.
Yeah, I would say that from my perspective, but I go to a smaller school, so it's a little bit different realistically.
Rachel, do you have a spinoff of what he just shared? Because you're always good at tracking.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that you've noticed maybe like yourself and a lot of other people's personalities change over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. And it's like, maybe you guys haven't figured out a way to make sense of what's happening. Is that right?
Yeah, it may happen sometime in the future. It may happen now. I think it's up to the person, really.
Do you think there has been a general sadness among the youth during the pandemic? Sadness as a whole?
Yeah, I do. I think it's been recognized by social media even better. So maybe like there is some sort of growth to be said from social media.
Okay.
Recognize.
Okay.
But maybe not knowing how to deal with it.
So if they recognize being, yeah, go ahead, Miss Rachel.
I'm just fascinated. I think Grant's going to be a like amazing researcher on emotion. I'm like, I can't wait to read your book.
Okay.
Yeah. So with sadness, we know from emotionally focused therapy, when you feel sad, you're supposed to reach and connect with someone. Do you think your friend, or do you think as a whole, your generation is reaching more for others, or?
I think it's give and take. I think it's up to the person, really.
Oh.
They're like, if you're somebody who found enjoyment from being at home, you may just not reach at all, and that could end badly. That could be better. I really don't know. But for me, I ended up reaching for people. I found more friendship after the pandemic, but during the pandemic it was rough. So like I didn't have anybody to reach to. I actually lost some friendships, I would say, during the pandemic. So it was pretty tough. But after I found myself reaching a lot more than I did before.
That's growth. That's positive.
That is growth.
That could be a teenager growth. But
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about so many things. This is so interesting. I'm really glad that you're on here today. How much do you think that this like change that you've noticed, how much do you think that's maybe related to mental health, like maybe like symptoms of depression or anxiety?
Are you speaking about myself or just in general?
Yeah, just your opinion, an observation. Yeah.
Depression and anxiety. Coming back from the pandemic was definitely anxious. I felt anxiety. Depression during the pandemic, during the quarantine, I probably felt it. Maybe I didn't recognize it at the time, but I probably did feel it. I guess for me, I had a unique comeback from it. We'll say unique, but it wasn't great. I came back, probably lost someone that I really loved at the time, and then I felt depression. But it was whatever. But I think now I recognize those emotions a lot more from the pandemic, actually feeling them. Maybe it was a much needed growth.
Yeah. Thanks for being vulnerable. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Good example of secure bond here for us, huh?
Yeah. So good.
All right.
Miss Rachel, do you have any more for Mr. Grant?
I don't think so. Grant, do you have anything else you're just really wanting to share?
I don't think I do.
Okay.
Thank
Wow.
you.
That's awesome. Did he sign a confidentiality agreement? No, I'm just kidding.
You signed the confidentiality.
Whatever that's called. We have people sign for the podcast. I'm joking, making jokes.
He's in my liability clause.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
Well, that was helpful to hear from a teen's perspective of the pandemic. And
fascinating.
I know. I didn't know this.
I'm going to start asking the teens that I see, how do you feel you've changed? How do you feel your friends have changed? That's really interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, it was very isolating, sounds like. You and I just kept doing what we do, only we went to the Zoom. I mean, but they weren't having these interactions. I mean, some were online, some were not, you know.
Yeah. Well, we know that there's a huge importance on like how close emotionally and connected you feel to someone with proximity. And they had no proximity to anyone their age, you know, most of them. who they live with,
Yeah.
who they, probably didn't want to see all the time.
No, teenagers.
Everyone getting on each other's nerves. Yeah.
Well, that was super interesting and helpful. So, and I like that what he shared about, hey, maybe just saying it out loud as you're driving on your way home from work, school, or if you're just outside on a walk, sort of sharing, what am I feeling today? I'm feeling happy because the sun's out and my doggy's wagging its tail, or I feel a little sad when I see people suffering in a war zone. Just sort of saying it out loud helps you to make sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was a great segue into our last few bullet points here, right? Because Grant was saying that it's helpful to be able to distinguish between the different emotions, and how like saying it out loud would kind of help him to distinguish. And that's because emotions are information. They help give meaning to our experiences. They're really, really important.
So important.
Yeah. So
So
we've got a list of like, I think 5 or 6 emotions here. 5. We've got 5 emotions here. And the reason why it's so important to be able to distinguish, okay, what am I feeling, is because these kind of main emotions help to cue us in on what is my unmet need. Linda and I are always talking about unmet needs on the podcast here.
That's very good. Yeah. And I love how you put it on there with our little outline is, when I'm feeling angry, I probably need a shield. I need protection.
Yes.
What can I do to feel safe? That's my unmet need. If I'm feeling sad, do I need some type of healing? If it's grief, maybe I need to write a celebratory conversation with that person that I lost and go to their graveside and talk to them about that. If I'm feeling fear, fight or flight, I need some safety. Where do I shelter at? Where do I go?
Yeah. How can I get some consistency? Right? Routine feels safe for a lot of people. Feels less chaotic, right? Yeah. And shame, this would be like, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable, I'm not good enough. You need to feel some type of acceptance or belonging, right? So who is the supportive, safe person in your life that you can go to with that? And if you don't have someone, then I highly recommend therapy, because your therapist will be the safe person that you go to with that. Feelings of shame.
Yeah, and everyone needs one person in life that they can reach for. One person that's safe.
Yeah. And then if you're feeling guilty, like, oh, I did something I'm not proud of, I don't want to do that again, then chances are you probably need to feel some sense of respect, right? Like, man, did that just ruin my entire reputation? You need to know that you're still worthy of respect, even if you messed up.
Yeah, because say you might engage in a behavior that, you called someone a name, or you might feel guilt, which is the guilt, which Brene Brown talks about in one of her books, is the guilt. Okay, I need to go say, hey, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And then you earn that respect back from that person. And so the unmet need is to repair that quickly. So
yeah, Brene does such a great job of like pointing out the difference between guilt and shame, right? Guilt is focused on the behavior. I did something bad. Shame is focused on the self. I am bad. So that's the difference. I find that very helpful when we're trying to figure out, what is this emotion?
Mm-hmm. Well, Miss Rachel, do you have any more like things you want to share regarding emotion that our listeners might need to hear more about? Or
Yeah, I guess I'll just share like the goal, what I hope this podcast will help people achieve, and that is that all emotions are important.
mm,
All emotions are relatively healthy and normal, right?
right?
It's just it's how we, what are that behavior, right? How we express them can turn into unhealthy, right? Like if you're expressing anger by yelling and throwing and breaking things, that's not okay. But the anger itself is okay. It's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's a necessary emotion. It lets us know that we're experiencing an injustice or a threat and we need to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So I guess it's like the goal would be learning to accept all emotions without judgment. Like work on not judging yourself for feeling, because you are human and that's just what we do.
Well stated, Rachel. Yeah, instead of judging, well, if I cry, then people think I'm weak. Well, you're human and you're experiencing sad, so it's okay.
Yeah.
What Rachel and I and this Caitlin do in therapy is we help you track and reflect what's happening here and what is your unmet need. So if your unmet need is to reach for someone, kind of like what Grant was saying, hey, I needed to make new friends. Okay, go outside your comfort zone and connect with others, you know.
Mhm.
So we appreciate you guys listening and sharing our podcast for our little practice here in the Valley. And if you know you're in need of therapy, or you have a teenager, that's Rachel and mine's expertise. We work with teens. We have been since the beginning of our careers. It's been teenagers. We'd love to, just be there for them. And if, maybe, like for me, like sometimes I don't always know what Grant needs. Well, a counselor could help that. And that's great. We need a village, a whole team.
Yes. Yes, we do. You're so right.
Yeah.
Okay. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.